But we're here to see Carie Fisher, who is currently working with DQ, who are accessibility leaders in the field. And Carie is their senior lead developer trainer with a long title that she can't remember.
Yeah, I don't.
So, and she's going to talk about SEO, accessibility, finding the place where accessibility and SEO happily coexist.
Yes, I'm going to take you on a journey. Thanks, Amy June. Welcome. Can everyone see the screen okay? And I'm loud enough? All right, let me know, wave if you need me to speak louder. We don't have mics up here, or I can turn off, dim the lights, but you guys might take a nap. Today we're going to go on a journey together to that mythical place where accessibility and SEO happily coexist. That's kind of a fun title, but what does that really mean in a practical sense? Well, if you have a limited budget and or time frame for a project, targeting the 5 areas that we're going to go over today will help boost both your SEO and your accessibility at the same time. So let's see if I can get this going next. Again, I'm Carie Fisher. I'm the other Carie Fisher. Senior Accessibility Instructor and Developer at DQ. And I'm just going to take 1 minute to tell you what DQ is, because I know that this is a Drupal crowd, so you may not really understand. But we're a company that specializes in digital accessibility. I started off as a front-end developer in the Drupal sphere and got more and more nuanced. You know, you go full stack, and then you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm a front-end. Okay, now I'm a front-end specialist in accessibility, and now I'm on that next journey in my career here. So DQ helps other companies make their websites and mobile applications more accessible. We work with making tools, we do education, we do audits, we do all kinds of stuff. You guys might have heard of one of our tools called Axe. It's an open source tool. It's both in the inspector for Firefox and for Chrome, and we have extensions also. But we have a suite of tools depending on the client and their needs. So we get really kind of nerdy about accessibility. So before we jump right into the different ways to improve our website, let's do a quick review about SEO and accessibility, because I'm guessing some of you might be more SEO, some might be more accessibility. Anyone know about SEO? Feel like you're a marketing genius? You can tell me a few things. Any accessibility gurus? I know Dan. All right, we have some people out there. So we're kind of like, we're all coming from different places. So we're going to get together. Let's plan our trip. So some of these things might be a review for you guys, and some might be new. So just pretty basic stuff. SEO, search engine optimization, or SEO for short, is a marketing discipline that focuses on making strategic changes to websites to increase the overall search engine ranking, which in turn hopefully drives users and sales to the site. A lot of this is kind of black box, where you're kind of guessing about what kind of formulas the search engines are using, and you have things that you know are tried and true, and there's some things that are more experimental. So it actually really impresses me, the people who do that. The one thing we do know for sure about SEO, though, is it is big business. So we have a chart here from 2008 to projected 2020. It's pretty astronomical, and you can see that trend keeps increasing. So this is in billion US dollars. So it started off back in 2008 when they started doing the measure, around 11 billion. Now we're projected to get up to about 80 in the next couple of years. And that is just on SEO. That's not marketing in general. That is just one little facet of marketing. So it's pretty astronomical. Add that all together, it's big numbers that are being funneled just for that specific task. On the flip side of that coin, we're talking about accessibility, and in this case, digital accessibility in particular, and it's the acronym for that, or the shortened version of that, is A11Y. So if you ever see that floating around, that just means accessibility, probably digital. It's about designing or building your digital offerings in such a way that regardless of a person's mental or physical ability, they can still interact with your website, your app, your electronic document, or whatever in a meaningful and equal way. The equal part is very important. So here's some numbers for accessibility. According to the World Health Organization, we have 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, having some sort of disability. I always feel a little bit like Austin Powers when 1 billion, it's like this astronomical number that's really hard to comprehend. But these are just the people who identify as having a disability. There's plenty of people who could benefit from having accessible websites, such as people with temporary disabilities. Let's say I break my wrist, I can't use my mouse. Situationally disabled, so I'm on a bus or a train and I'm trying to read my screen, but there's glare on it. Mildly disabled, a lot of people who could be considered helped by accessible websites, like people who are colorblind or people who are hard of hearing or have some less eyes, be able to see less but not consider themselves blind. They don't even consider themselves part of this number, so this number could go way higher. If we're talking about US alone, we have the 56.7 million, which is 19% of the population, who again, this is just identifying as being disabled. And this is a number, okay, so then that was about like California and New York. That's roughly what you're thinking of. So this is another category where we lump into accessibility now, which is people over the age of 65. So again, this is not someone who'd be considered disabled in a traditional sense, but who could benefit from accessibility. So these people, this is sort of like having Texas and Illinois together. So roughly 32% of the population. So if you're ignoring this collective demographic, you're losing up to 32% of your potential users. So if we're talking about, so that might be fine and well, and you guys like, okay, I get it. There's a billion people in the world, great, who could benefit from accessibility. But you also know they have money. They have a lot of money to spend. People with disabilities alone control over $1 trillion, and they have over 200 billion that they see fit to spend, so big discretional income. And then we have the people over 65 who, it's a lot less, but this number is going to be doubling in the next year as people are pushing off retirements, they're working longer, they have a lot more money saved up, so they have a lot more to spend. So total, you have over 200 billion, $81 million that if your company is spending money on SEO but not addressing accessibility needs, they're missing out on both their users and their money. So besides the two things, the potential users and revenues, why should marketers and business leaders be concerned about accessibility for their website? Well, besides that, you have, according to the W3C, you have better search results, reduced maintenance costs, increase in audience reach and retention, and you just have happier customers and users. So to recap, SEO and digital accessibility, they're not the same thing. There are different rules to follow, different audiences to target, and different ways to test the effectiveness of each. Some people think that optimizing a website for search engine bots will also make it accessible to real people, and that's not the case, sadly. And the reverse, some people think that if you optimize for accessibility, all of a sudden now it's going to look for SEO, but that also doesn't work. But there is that silver, like little sliver right there where they come together, and so if you can target that little section, you're not going to hurt your SEO, you're not going to hurt your accessibility, and you might improve both. So we're going to go over those guidelines today. Hopefully that little quick recap, everyone's good. So now that we have some background out of the way, let's explore the ways SEO and accessibility can overlap. So we're taking you on a journey today. Our first stop is structure. So structure matters. Don't underestimate the power of a good user interface. Websites with clean, clear, and consistent UIs are particularly good for search engine bots and assistive technology devices, or people who only use a keyboard. So if you think about it, if a bot cannot find a page, how can they possibly read or interact with it? You need to make finding the pages and interacting with websites as easy as possible. So these are some of the best practices for structure. So we want to construct our navigation and page layout with a clear and consistent way. Again, if your website is difficult to navigate or use, it may affect user analytic stats, like including time on a website, pages viewed, bounce rate. Again, this may in turn hurt your SEO ranking. At the very least, it irritates your users if they can't find what they're looking for. Having multiple ways to find content, such as search bars, sitemaps, tables of content, some of those things that might be considered more old school, like having an outline or like an XML file with all your lists of all your pages and stuff. But those actually do help search engine bots a lot, and they like the well-organized website architecture. And they also index your content in a more meaningful way because they can see the groupings. Next one is to make sure you're avoiding your styles to convey meaning. Basically says you should never fake an HTML element. You should be using HTML markup instead. So don't fake like a footer or header or whatever. You need to actually use the actual markup for that. That's the kind of related to the second part. When appropriate, use your HTML page elements, article, section, header, footer, etc. Those elements are more descriptive to both search engine bots and assistive technology devices than using things like plain divs and Ps and spans. So we have over here like a little quick image where this is HTML4, and it might be fine if you have that set up right now, like your div ID is your menu, or you have a footer or class or whatever. And that's okay. That's really good in some ways, but what is better is the HTML5 version, which is adding some of these newer elements that are part of your website structure. So an assistive technology device or a bot knows right away what a footer is. It doesn't have to think, okay, this ID that says footer, is it really a footer? Or maybe you just don't even have an ID or class on it. So. And then this is a video of Hattie Rangan. I'm going to show you a little snippet. He's an expert user of screen reader software, and he works for the University of Washington. In this video, he's demonstrating the elements of a well-designed page and how they sound to someone who is blind. In this snippet, Hattie shows the difference between a site with good semantic markup and one without. So it doesn't even have this. It just has like divs and spans and stuff. It's not even doing like the bare minimum. And one like kind of side note is pay attention to the screen reader at the very beginning of this video, because that's like the normal speed of a screen reader, and then he turns it like way, way, way slower for us to like understand it. But I'm always amazed, and like if you've never heard a screen reader before, like when you see and hear like a native user using it, it blows my mind how fast it goes. I can't keep up with it, but let's see if I can get this audio here.
An accessible website.
Can you guys hear that? Okay.
This is the
accessible university.
That is the accessible version of a fictional university that we have developed here. We call that accessible university. Here, for example, on this accessible page, I can ask my screen reader to show me the major component of the page.
Document regions dialog, regions preview.
It tells me we have a banner section,
Main menu navigation,
we have a main menu section,
name,
and the main body,
apply now form,
and then there is another region,
content information,
and content information, which is the same as footer section. So, assuming the page has been developed correctly, I have good idea about the major component of the page.
An inaccessible website.
Let me now go to see this page, the inaccessible version of this page.
home page Mozilla accessible university demo site accessible version, accessible university.
This looks pretty much same as the other one, the accessible version. But here, when I ask my screen reader to convey the major component,
No regions were found on it.
it said the no region found. So for me, practical
Accessible university.
is that I have to read from top to bottom.
Accessible university alt tag, untitled no alt tag.
And if those accessibility features are not present, everything has the same weight. So we do not, there is no way for us to say that where a major section starts or where it ends. It is really not just the fact reading the content. It is also about the navigation. We have to discover the page, and then that is the most time-consuming problem. Because once you know where you are, what you are reading, then it is usually fine. But the discovery process or navigation process is the most complicated process in an accessibility field. In order to do it, I have to read from top to bottom. Whereas in the accessible version, I could easily see what the major components were, and then select the desired one and move to that section.
Yeah, good. It stopped when I wanted it to, but kind of a few things to point out was just again the speed, and that was slowed down when he was like showing it to us. But it's really, really fast, and so they get a lot of information. So what he's saying is that when there aren't specific things like headers, articles, navs, he has to go through every line to figure out where he is on the page. And if you've got a typical website where you've got maybe a sidebar nav or you've got some special things in your footer, like it can get really confusing, especially if the order is incorrect. So semantic markup, just by having things like in a header tag or in a footer tag, he can jump like, oh, I need to go to the footer, I know I need to go to the nav, like he can jump around a lot easier without going page to page.
So,
Uh-huh.
the div class post, that's specific enough?
Well, see, this is, you might have come in
Well,
a
that's
little bit
HTML4.
later. Yeah, so this is for, and this is okay, but that is better. So if you can use like the semantic markup, that's already there. All right, so we're moving on to our second stop on the place where SEO and accessibility overlap, and that's headings. So not to be confused with that header tag that we just saw at the beginning, these are headings, so H1 through H6. So again, your website content can easily be boiled down to markup. That includes tags that are used for your page as headings. Navigating 1 through H2 headings, so like what he was showing us, the user or search engine bot, they can know how the overall structure is. And when they go through the H3 through the H6, it's more of an understanding of the details of that section. So it's important to both accessibility and SEO to get these headings right. So again, some best practices. We want to keep our heading tags consistent. And again, don't style them, just have the visual appearance of headings. I don't know how many times as front-end developer where it's like you have an H2 and then you have an H3, but you want your H3 to look like an H5 for whatever reason in that section. But don't avoid that temptation because you really do want to keep them in logical order, H1, H2, H3. The only thing, so going down, so when you go up, like you end a section like in an H4, your next section could be an H2. You can go up, you can skip when you go up. You can't when you go down. But again, you think of it, headings as more of an outline of your page, and if you were writing an article, you might write an outline of what your subjects are and your subheadings and all that. So if you think about your headings themselves as more of an outline of what the content is and what you want someone to get out of your page, then it becomes a little bit easier. So just don't fake it. It's a big one. Again, here's your headings, your outlines. Again, you're going always H1, H2, H3. But I can see if I'm done with my H3, I can go back to an H2. That's okay to do because it's almost like this is a section. So that's fine to do. Tim?
So it might be that more obvious, but so your point is that an H3 can look like an H1 as long as you tagged it correctly.
Yeah, technically, but I mean, some people would argue too that visually you'd want them to also kind of be consistent. So then you're talking, but that's more about user experience. That technically has SEO and accessibility. They don't have to look the same, but that's another side. So we're going to see another little quick snippet of Hattie. He's going to show us how headings additionally help them understand the page without having to go through.
When you play it?
Yeah. Oh, that's not where I wanted.
Leaving menus, heading list dialog, headings list view list.
Headings
That's this loud.
is also a means to get information about the structure of the content. It gives me a good understanding, good overview about the major or minor component of the content. So I see that here.
Welcome to Featured Story Slideshow 2. Accessible University 1.
It's an Accessible University itself is a heading 1, and under that we have
Featured Story Slideshow.
Features Story, which is a heading 2. It automatically conveys the information that this section is a subsection of the heading above. See that also the overall get an outline of the page and the major sections of that. That is the difference between accessible and inaccessible.
That screenwriter can
I don't know why it popped into a new window there, but basically it was just showing, and I tried to turn it up a little bit. Sorry, you can come and look at my videos later if you want, or I can send you a link. But again, it's just showing you that essentially assistive technology devices and SEO bots, they're using your markup. Like markup is really key for both of those. So let's get this guy back over here. The third stop on our journey today are links. So perfecting your links. Links can make or break a website for both search engine bots and people using assistive technology devices. After reviewing the page structure and the headings that we've already talked about, links are the next major element that users and crawlers most often take note of. So it's essential that your links are as perfect as possible. So again, some best practices here for links. Make sure you have no broken links. That's a super easy one. Like you can crawl your site and just make sure, do it monthly, do it weekly, however much content you have. But if you have broken links, that can be seen as a sign of a neglected or abandoned website for SEO. It's also obviously bad website accessibility practice that can frustrate or confuse your users. You click a link and all of a sudden they don't know where they are, or it's dead and they don't know how to get back. That can be frustrating. Use the internal tagging type links. So that is basically if you have blog posts and you want to tag them all with like ARIA or SEO or Drupal or whatever. So these are giving groupings automatically. So something I wrote this year is going to be linked to something Amy June wrote last year on the same subject. Studies have shown that it improves your SEO by relating these pieces of content together, especially again like groups of posts. Skip adding descriptive title links to your links. So that's that thing that when you hover over a link, sometimes like a thing pops up and it tells you about your link. It's actually not wrong to add them, but it also doesn't necessarily help your SEO or your accessibility. And so it's kind of a waste of time. I know a lot of people, and I think Drupal has that built in now as like that's a field or whatever, but you don't really need it for either. But you should do the descriptive link text. So what that is like, have you gone to a website that says click here to learn more or read more or whatever, and that's not very descriptive. You can continue to use those links if you want that terminology, but you just have to provide additional visually hidden information using like a visually hidden class or ARIA methods. And that's what we're going to demo real quick. So I don't mean to scare anyone who doesn't do code. Here's a little code. So what this is showing that, and we'll see this demo. This is a demo of a screen reader, and it's using the accessibility style guide that I helped create a couple years ago now. And the accessibility style guide is doing like patterns that you typically find on a website. And then this section, we're going through the read more links. So blah, 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 read more, blah, 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 read more. And so every single link on here will say read more, read more, read more. You can see like if here's your A-ref, right? They all say read more, but there's additional code behind them. So when you read it with the screen reader, it's going to say something different than just read more. It will say read more about blah, blah, blah. Here, I'll just do the demo. But the point is if you want to continue to use the term click here or read more on your website, you can. You just need to work a little harder and add a little bit more. Let's see if I can get this volume up again.
Voiceover on Chrome. A11Y Style Guide. Window. A11Y Style Guide. Web content has keyboard focus. You are currently on web visited. Link. Read more links. Visited. WCAG2. Visited. Link. Read more. Storms hit East Coast. Visited. Link. Learn more about trapped black bears. Visited. Link. Read more. This is a quote from the 1948 movie The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Visited. Link. About mass hysteria in relation to movie quotes. Read more. Voiceover off.
So this is helpful for both SEO and accessibility because it gives more context about what is going on, what they are reading more about or clicking here about. So there's some little tricks that you can do if you want to keep that phrase or that terminology, but you want to also boost your accessibility and SEO. All right, next stop is media. So supplementing your media. People with visual disabilities, so people with like seizure disorders or blind, and a whole other gamut in between. Auditory disabilities such as being deaf or hard of hearing. Situational temporary disabilities, we kind of talked about that earlier. But also people with poor bandwidth connections and many others can benefit from media that's displayed in an accessible way. Sometimes people describe search engine bots as being disabled because they don't have eyes, ears, hands, and they rely on image names, descriptions, and alt text to tell them what the image or media is depicting. So having these elements in place is essential to both supplementing the surrounding content and the overall experience. So media best practices here, less is more. Think twice about keeping non-essential media. So if you do need that complex media, make sure you include controls like a play, a pause button. Don't auto start things. Ideally, all the media controls should also be accessible. Provide alternate ways to access your media. So if you have a video, maybe you have transcripts and captions. Maybe you have a transcript for an audio-only file. There's all kinds of things that you can do. There's even things like Braille formatted files, and most people probably don't do that, but there are a lot of options available. This next one, being clear and consistent and accurate with your file naming. So if you have a picture of an orange tabby cat, the file name should not be brownpuppy.jpg. It shouldn't be file1234.ping, for example, because that's not very descriptive about what the image actually is. And if you can, add alternative text to it. So that's that information in the alt tag that just says like what this image is about. But keep it under 125 because people with screen readers have to sit there and listen to it all, and they kind of get annoyed if they have to listen to a paragraph. So 125 is kind of your limit. And write it like a human and not a robot. So a lot of people use alt text to do like keyword stuffing. People with screen readers have to, again, listen to that. So it could be like cat, 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 cat. You know, like 20 orange cat, tabby, tabby, or whatever keywords, you know, like SEO, like just to get more, you know, but they don't like it. And search engine formulas will also penalize you, so you don't want to do that. So here's a little exercise kind of illustrating that point. I call it my bad example here. Maybe I shouldn't, bad is too mean, but my image is 7736.jpg and my alt here is snail. So in your mind, you might be thinking of what probably most people think of as like a snail. This snail happens to be eating a piece of lettuce. It's hanging out on a mirror. I don't know. He's cute though. Or maybe you're a child of the 70s, and so you think of psychedelic snails on mushrooms and concert last night that we went to. They might be thinking that. Maybe you just got back from the spa and you had a new snail facial, which looks horrendous to me. This is like my ultimate nightmare, but that could be what you're thinking of. Or maybe you're into cartoons, so you think of Gary the snail from SpongeBob SquarePants. So that's, you know, and that's a funny kind of way to look at it, but if all you say is snail, I mean, it could be anything, really. So in this more good example, you can see our file name is called snail, so that's not very descriptive, but at least we know it's not saying cat or dog or 1, 2, 3, 4. And my alt here is small pink snail resting on top of a gray-capped mushroom with green moss in the background. That might be like a little bit of overkill, but actually that's 92 characters or something, so this is not even 125. I could have gone on a little bit more. So this might not be exactly what you thought of, but this is probably close to like what you're kind of thinking of what would be in that description. And this is important because it can, like, the alt text is good obviously for your SEO, but it also is talking about your brand and like the feeling and the emotions that you want to convey with an image, because any image that's on your website was picked for a reason, to supplement whether it's the content or your overall brand and that sort of thing. So it's really important to have that. One way that some people talk about alt imagery too is on a telephone, right? This is the easy way, I think of it, is like, so I call my mom up and I say, hey mom, I'm in the park. I see a man, a woman, and 2 dogs. And I hang up. And then so she's thinking, okay, there's just a man. Like in her mind, she's got an idea of what that could be, right? It's not very descriptive. If But I call her and I say, hey, Mom, I'm in the park, and this really tall man has this tiny little toy poodle. It's like white and fluffy, and like started attacking this lady who was jogging, and like, you know, it becomes this whole new narrative, right? It's conveying that emotion, and it conveys more details. And so that's what I kind of think of when I talk about alternative text. Like, it's an easy way to do it. All right, enough about that. So the last stop here today, we're going to talk about content. So decluttering your content. So last but not least, after addressing the website's overall structure, your headings, your links, your images, and other media, the next step is to focus on the actual content. So since each website is kind of like a unique snowflake, there's a lot of variability into what the actual content from one website is to the next. So what works for your users and your website might not work for another person's site. But regardless of your website's topic, there's some general commonalities and best practices. So do not duplicate content. Like, I wanted to have another bullet later that said do not duplicate content, because that's the one, you know, the one number one thing. Like, SEO will ping you on it. You can't have the same content over and over again. And users just get confused. They get irritated, so don't do that. One kind of quick thing, if you are in there and you want to emphasize, highlight words with strong and emphasis. It's just a tiny change from doing bold and italics, but for people using assistive technology devices, and they've also seen that some search engine bots also look for these tags instead, because it's like a more, like the assistive technology devices will actually read the emphasis, or it'll read the bold, where it won't read, like it'll read the strong emphasis but not the bold and italics. So it's a small tweak, but you don't, if you're already in there working on your content, it's one more thing you could do. Bullets, lists, and white space. They help break up your content for readers, of course, making them more user-friendly, but research also indicates that search engine bots prefer content with bullets and numbers over plain text. And that white space also helps people with attention deficit disorder and dyslexia to be able to focus a little bit better. So, excuse me. The last point is to make sure you limit the length of each paragraph to about 3 sentences and target your reading grade level consistent with your audience. They actually talk a lot about the 9th grade level, and I was confused about like why it is that we want to target 9th grade. Maybe your people are in college, or maybe they're professionals and they've gone on further to grad school. So I went to this talk. It was actually an accessibility talk with Ashley Bischoff. I think you went to that one. And she's a wealth of information about why you want to target that. So I was just going to play a little snippet. But the whole thing is good, but I'm not going to play an hour for you.
When it comes to checking on what you've written,
Volume.
one tool that I like quite a lot is the Readability Analyzer. Now, these readability algorithms that I mentioned, they're all published and available to anyone. So anyone can write tools that check writing against the given algorithm. So one thing that I like about the Readability Analyzer is that it's web-based and it's free. And you can get to it at bit.ly/readinganalyzer. And once you load up this page, once you're loading up the Readability Analyzer, you can use it by pasting your text content into the box, and then the site calculates your text's readability numbers. It'll actually come up with a couple of different readability scores. But the readability score that I think is worth concentrating on is the Flesch-Kincaid reading grade level. And that's just because that's one of the more prominent calculations for calculating reading grades. So what I would recommend is to keep your text readable. Aim for a Flesch-Kincaid grade level that's less than 9. Now, I can understand if that might seem a little bit weird, because you might be thinking, okay, well, what if my readers have graduated from high school? Wouldn't that be 12 years? Or perhaps your readers have gone to university, and which would be 4 years on top of that. Theoretically, 16 years of school. So you might be thinking, okay, well, where does this 9 come from? Well, it turns out that reading grade calculations represents someone's reading level under ideal conditions. So for example, if you were to have someone who's graduated from high school, which in the US would be 12 years of school, and maybe there are some ideal conditions. Perhaps they had a really great night's sleep and they remembered to eat breakfast, and they're at the office in a quiet room, good lighting, they don't have a care in the world. Yeah, under those ideal conditions, they might be able to just reach their theoretical maximum reading level. But the thing is that real life is not an ideal condition. In real life, maybe you didn't sleep so good last night. Maybe you ate a cookie for breakfast instead of oatmeal. Or maybe you skipped breakfast. Maybe there was a traffic jam on the way into work. Maybe you've got fluorescent lights flickering overhead once you're in the office. Maybe there's some sales guy on his cell phone down the hallway. Or maybe there's a leaf blower running outside. Or maybe you're worried about how your kid's going to do on their math test on Tuesday. All of these factors tend to tug down for a maximum reading level.
So again, that's more about the accessibility side, about why you want to aim your level to about number 9. So again, if you are under ideal circumstances, yeah, maybe you could read something at a level 16, but yeah, maybe you stayed up too late, maybe you were working on a project, maybe you're just tired. So that's a lot of good reasons. But for SEO, it's also very important because content is the foundation of everything. It doesn't matter how good your social media presence is, how clean your links are, or relevant your keywords are. If the content isn't really relevant and easily consumed, read accessibility, people will leave your site quickly, so they'll just bounce away. So again, to make sure that your content is ready for prime time, she showed one example, but there's a lot of other tools you can use to clean it up. I use the Hemingway editor all the time. It's free. Grammarly is kind of annoying because they have ads and stuff, but you can also use that. But even websites, they have tools. You can have tools built into your editor itself. And then with all those tools and reports that come out of it, just pay attention to the Flesch-Kincaid grade level, and you'll be good. I mean, it won't be perfect, just got to work at it. You'll be better than you were before. So again, these are kind of like the 5 main easy areas where SEO and accessibility can overlap. And doing some of these and working on those best practices, and you won't necessarily harm your SEO, you won't necessarily harm your accessibility, and in fact, you'll hopefully increase both of those. So I think that I'm done, and I have a few minutes for questions, so let me know, or you can find me on different places as well. So, no questions? You guys are all experts now. Yeah.
The link stuff. I didn't understand what you were talking about.
Sure.
What? Tagging links. I was a little confused.
So let's go back to links. Oh, that's media. Go. All right, links.
Internal tagging type links.
So that's sort of like a blog post. So let's say you have a section of your website. A blog is the easiest one for some reason. And so the tagging, internal tagging would be like, I wrote an article about SEO. And Amy June, then a couple months later, wrote an article about SEO. And so that way, that they both have that tag, like a taxonomy tag. You could use that.
Tagging the content.
The content itself. And so then that way, those pieces of content are interrelated. And so if I'm a user and talking about accessibility, I'm all about SEO, and so I want to read all the SEO stuff that that website has to offer. Or maybe I'm a search engine bot and I want to link those pieces together, right? So if you read this, you might read this kind of thing. And so if your site has, let's say, a bunch that are tagged with the same thing, in theory, that would boost your SEO, and you'd be like, oh, this site really knows a lot about SEO because they have like 100 articles about SEO. And I know that because they're all linked together. So again, some of the way that the formulas that they work with the SEO, like it is a little black box. I kind of talk about it as like playing a game with a toddler where they can change the rules at any moment, and you don't know if they change the rules or not until you see like your rankings start to go down, and you're like, well, something obviously changed. Nothing changed with us. Like, it's a little bit. I mean, there's people that think, but that's how I think of it, as just like a toddler who's always going to win, and they have all the control, and they can change the rules on a whim. And so the things that were relevant yesterday aren't necessarily, like, I'm old enough to know, like, back in the day you could see your score, your Google score, and you could actively, like, it was present there all the time. You could just like click your button. But
so I think what I was
that
confused
now.
about is you should tag a blog post SEO, and I'm thinking we were tagging the content, not the link. But if you've got the little link there that says SEO, then you
Yeah.
can click to other.
Yeah, and if you had, like, if you did like a taxonomy page where you had all of them printed out, like a view or something like that.
You also had descriptions of links, the ARIA you were using.
Mhm.
To be honest, I have not been keeping up with the ARIA stuff. So basically, I can create a description of a link using the ARIA label or ARIA.
Yeah, I probably glossed over that a little too fast because I wanted to make sure I didn't exclude anyone. But so basically, there's 4 different methods. It's also on the website, 4 different methods, and these aren't the only methods. These are just some of the methods. So in this case, the read more. Let's see, we have an ARIA labeled by, and then I know that the ARIA labeled by is by this ID called headline. And then I can see up here my ID headline is saying storms hit the East Coast. So I know that this is going to say read more about storms hitting the East Coast, right?
So how are those set in Drupal?
Drupal, yeah. I mean, you'd have to do, yeah.
They're not set, yeah.
So you'd have to probably do some Mojo, but like you could probably do that in your page template file and then like reference like a field or something. So you could do that. You could set it, but like anything, this is a perfect world scenario where you have control.
I get to it, I can set it. I have the site, I have things that I can't get to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to modify.
I think that's part of the problems that we have in general with having a CMS and having to have so many uses for so many people. So I would say if that doesn't exist already, or if that's very difficult, that there's the accessibility Slack group, there's accessibility Drupal group. Obviously you can do like a bug ticket or whatever, but Andrew McPherson, Mike Gifford, I know are very active in the code level for that too. So it could be that that's just a suggestion, and other teams help to work on that. But yeah, it's harder when you don't have control over everything. That's for sure. But yeah, perfect world scenario. You do have options. So I don't know.
So what you didn't mention that I think I caught myself doing recently was a link that isn't a link, right? That it's JavaScript. So it's just a span or a div.
Yeah.
It's clickable. It's exposing content or something.
Are you doing like a pop-up or modal or something?
I think that's, I'm trying to remember the exact scenario, but
Yeah.
I suddenly remember looking at this and like an action's happening here. It's not a link. We're sort of treating it that way.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about like a link that looks like a button but is a link kind of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know from an SEO perspective if you get dinged too much on things like that, but from an accessibility perspective, you have that, that HTML tag button, right? And that's what you would use to indicate a button, both for SEO and for accessibility. But if you have like an A link and then it just styled like a button, I don't know, that's just kind of cheating your users. Like if it's a button, it's a button. If it's a div that you're styled to look like a button, it's kind of like a fake button. I don't know. It's nasty in a way, but I won't go into those accessibility why, but we can chat about that later if you want. People get really irate. Like it's like anything, when you get specialized, people get irate about the littlest thing, and like that is one of the big ones, link versus button in the accessible world that people just like to talk about at length. So I won't bore the rest of you, but cool. Any more thoughts, questions, concerns? Want to talk about anything? All right,
I'll throw one out. You're just talking about at the start having the content having a lot of structure and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I always see our marketing people always wanting to do is having these kind of really specific landing pages and types of things that are not usually kind of in the structure of the website, usually for like a certain marketing campaign or
Oh.
something like that. Like, is that helpful, you think, or is that a problem, or just should that be part of the navigation or something?
No,
Does that make sense? I don't know.
No, I know what you're saying. It's like what do they call those, splash pages or something? Splash
Yeah.
landing pages. I think that's more, I think of those more as advertisements, and
Yeah.
so it's sort of like a flyer. I think the hard thing about things like that is how did you get there and how do you get to your rest of your content? But
Right.
if you can make that, it's almost like a mini website, so to speak. It could be a one-off, like one page, but it's
Yeah.
still considered kind of like a separate entity, I guess, from your
I
main
guess
website.
I always just think it's kind of weird, like being like, oh, this is a page you can only get to from this secret location somewhere.
Yeah. I think that's more for like tracking users and
Yeah.
like, I don't know, marketing mojo kind of stuff that I'm not an expert at. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily hurts. But I think it's one of those things that it's probably not, there's probably not a ton of relationship that is built because of that. That is so
Sure.
separate. But cool. Well, thank you guys for the time. Appreciate it.